held by the Washington Student Achievement Council. You may hear the Regional Challenge Grant referred to as RCG and the Washington Student Achievement Council referred to as WASAC, and requests for letters of interest referred to as LOI during this presentation. As you just heard, this session is going to be recorded and available on our website. So subsequently, if you would like to be off camera, you are welcome to, or we also welcome you to have your camera on during this session. Next slide, please. Almost. Pardon me. Next slide. Awesome, thank you. Today's presentation will include an approximately 20-minute slide deck from the RCG team about WASAC, the Regional Challenge Grant, and the 2024 Request for Letters of Interest. Throughout the presentation today, guests are welcome to include any questions that they may have in the Zoom Q&A box at the bottom bar of your screen. All submitted questions will be viewable to guests during the presentation, and there's an option to ask questions anonymously. After the presentation from our team, the rest of the information session will focus on the questions asked. Both information sessions will include the same slide deck, and attendance at either session is not required. In addition, relevant resources and links will be included throughout the presentation in the Zoom chat box. Next slide, please. First, to begin a round of introductions, my name is Hannah Lodwick. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director on the Strategy and Partnerships team at WASAC. I support program implementation, and in particular, I build relationships with the emerging and forming partnerships in the Regional Challenge Grant portfolio.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abby Roth. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm also an Associate Director on the Strategy and Partnerships team at WASAC. I work with the larger partnerships in our current cohort that are in the process of implementing strategies, and I support the development and implementation of RCG, or Regional Challenge Grant, as a whole with my colleagues here today.
And last but not least, my name is Casey Dean. I also use she, her pronouns, and I am part of the research team here at WASAC. As it relates to the Regional Challenge Grant, I support our team both in designing many parts of the grant reporting structure, as well as supporting our partnerships as they gather stories and evidence that demonstrate how they improve the lives of learners and families served by their work.
Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, as we've mentioned, we'll be sharing the same information in our slide presentation today as we shared in our last information session. But at the end, we will have an opportunity to take additional questions. So that's just a little bit about what's coming. I want to start today with a brief overview of the Washington Student Achievement Council, or WASAC. We are a cabinet-level state agency working to raise educational attainment through strategic engagement, program management, and partnerships. We lead strategic planning and support educational coordination. We also administer a number of financial aid programs, including the Washington College Grant, or WA Grant, and we advocate for post-secondary education in all of its forms. Next slide, please. So one of the ways that we put those different pieces of the agency's work together and into action is in pursuit of Washington's North Star for educational attainment. Washington State's attainment goal is that 70% of adults have a credential beyond high school. And when we're talking about adults in this case, we're talking about folks in the state ages 25 to 44. And when we talk about credentials, we are inclusive of both 2- and 4-year degrees, apprenticeship programs, certificates, and other programs. There are signs of improvement across the state when we think about our efforts to meet this goal, but unfortunately we remain persistently about 10 percentage points below at 60%. And simultaneously, the direct to college enrollment number that we also pay a lot of attention to, those students that are graduating from high school and enrolling in post-secondary programs right away, That number has decreased during the pandemic from about 59% with the class of 2019 to only 50% with the class of 2021. So all of our work at Wasac is engagement in one way or another, gearing ourselves towards meeting this goal. But today we're talking about one of the central ways that we are hoping to continue supporting and expanding our work in this effort. Next slide. So today we're talking about the Regional Challenge Grant, or RCG, and specifically the request for additional letters of interest. A brief overview of the Regional Challenge Grant. Passed in 2022 with bipartisan support, Senate Bill 5789 established Regional Challenge Grant with an initial investment of $6 million. And in 2023, the state increased that funding to $16 million in this current biennial budget. The central thinking behind Regional Challenge Grant is that our greatest chance of yielding the type of systemic change that we know is required in education when we talk about that 70% attainment goal, it requires that we center and uplift the strengths of communities and their collective efforts to improve educational outcomes for their students. So RCG supports cross-sector, place-based partnerships as they identify, test, implement, learn from different strategies to support learners in their communities in meeting the state's attainment goal. We know that meeting the attainment goal requires both culturally relevant and regionally responsive, geographically specific solutions. And so our goal is to empower regional partnerships that invest in communities to remove barriers of access to students in those communities so the whole state can learn from that process. So currently we have $4.85 million invested in our cohort of Regional Challenge Grant partnerships across 8 partnerships, including more than 65 organizations. And we're here today to talk more about our request for letters of interest to expand that cohort. Next slide, please. So I want to share a little bit more about the theory of change for Regional Challenge Grant and what we're looking for in this request for letters of interest. Much more depth on this topic is available in the full request for letters of interest document, as well as in our initial legislative report establishing the Regional Challenge Grant from 2023. Both are available on the Regional Challenge Grant website through the Wasac website, and we recommend reviewing them both as a part of this process. So in the most basic terms, the theory of change for Regional Challenge Grant is that Wasac use these funds to invest in the infrastructure of regional place-based partnerships as they develop and implement strategies to support the students and learners in their community with intention, and that this will bring increased understanding and increased attainment for all students, and also close equity gaps across post-secondary attainment in those communities. And once that happens, then we can learn collectively as a state about promising practices and strategies and bring those in our work to improve attainment across the state. Next slide, please.
This graph begins to illustrate where the post-secondary attainment goal does not look the same across a selection of different racial and ethnic groups in our state. We know that this is only one part of a larger picture where there is further evaluation required to paint the full picture of the wonderful learners who have rich backgrounds to bring to their own respective post-secondary pathway. As stated in the RCW for SB 5789, the purpose of RCG is to, quote, increase post-secondary enrollment and completion for students enrolling directly from high school and adults returning to education, and eliminate educational opportunity gaps for students of color, English language learners, students with disabilities, and foster and homeless youth. Wasac encourages partnerships to consider the broader landscape of learners in their communities who experience barriers that prevent access to educational opportunity. Learners in our state represent a wide range of intersectionality that is rich in experience, and as such, we recommend consideration of this background within your application. To meet the RCG purpose as written in statute, we must ensure that these pathways are built to support our learners across many different focal populations. You all today are the respective experts in your local community, and therefore you are best equipped to understand the structural barriers that a student or their family may face due to historic and current structural racism. And last, we recommend partnerships consider the rich assets focal populations bring to their own educational journeys. While there is one question out of the 8 that directly asks for more, we believe that this asset framing can be included throughout your application. We truly cannot wait to hear more about the wonderful students, learners, and families that are all supported as a result of your critical partnership work. Next slide, please. Based on continuous learning in the first year of RCG, we have established a clear funding vision for the 2024 LOI cycle. It is important to note that an emphasis here does not exclude consideration of other proposed areas. In a true place-based manner, activities proposed will be reflective of the wonderful and different regional communities from across our state. First, our hypothesis is that it takes a collective coming together with deep trusted relationships within their own community to meet the attainment goal. In 2024, we are prioritizing emerging and forming partnerships who are still establishing their network. This can look like recruiting or retaining partners, activities proposed around information gathering, strategizing, listening or surveying their own community, or a multitude of other proposed work that is reflective around a place in which a partnership resides and is community informed. Due to this, there is a broad range of activities that can be proposed. We believe that trusted relationship and partnership work takes time. As a result, partnerships are not expected to immediately dive into implementation level work. Community leaders such as yourselves are the ones that are best equipped to understand your local community's assets, strengths, and needs. And as a result, we lead with your expertise to understand the next best steps to increase post-secondary attainment in your community. Third, we are seeking a strategic emphasis on adult learners or credential completion. RCG defines adult learners broadly as any learner who did not directly enter and complete a post-secondary pathway after high school. Credential completion as a strategic emphasis is critical. This persistence and retention support is especially critical for first-generation students, low-income students, and students of color. WASAC includes completion as one of the 4 cluster areas of our strategic action plan. For more information, please see the link in the chat below. Next slide, please.
The RCG team has provided a variety of materials to support applicants as you complete your letter of interest. I'll talk through them here, but we will also include links to each resource in the chat as I talk about each one. First, we have tried to construct the request for letters of interest so that it captures the most relevant guidance that applicants might require as they write their LOI. This includes the specific questions that we expect each application will answer, as well as an overview of each phase of the application cycle. Because we've adjusted the letter of interest submission this cycle, we want to also make it easier for applicants to adhere to the new guidelines. For this end, you'll find a very simple Word document that serves as a template that applicants can use when drafting their LOI. It has placeholders for all of the cover page requirements, as well as includes each of the questions that we expect applicants will answer. All text will automatically format in alignment with the guidelines. You do not have to use this template, but our hope is that if you do, it makes the submission process that much easier for you. Once you're ready to submit, you will fill out the letter of interest submission form. This is also linked on our website and within the request for letters of interest. You'll upload as part of this form your written letter of interest as a PDF attachment. The next 2 resources get at questions you may encounter. This includes both the frequently asked questions document, which already has around 40 questions, and these information sessions. As we did after the first information session, we will post this whole session and update the frequently asked questions document based on new questions that surface. Again, presentations have been identical in both of these sessions. Lastly, if after today you encounter a question that's not answered in any of these resources, please send us a note, an email at the email address you'll see in the chat. Our team is unfortunately unable to meet with applicants about their materials while the request for letter of interest is open. That said, if your question is not addressed in existing resources and we receive the question in time, we'll be certain to incorporate a general response into the FAQ. We plan to continue updating this document with new questions and responses through the end of the day tomorrow, likely with a final version posted first thing next week. Next slide. Returning now to that LOI template and the formatting guidelines, I just want to take a moment to go over in detail what a submission attachment needs to look like when it's uploaded. Again, the hope here is that the LOI template makes adhering to these guidelines easier for applicants. If you use the template, everything I note below is already incorporated. First, the overall length of your responses cannot exceed 5 pages. The cover page, which includes the information listed on the slide here, does not count toward this page limit. So your document may total 6 pages at the time of submission. The uploaded letter of interest must respond to each of the 8 required questions outlined in the request for letters of interest. We estimate that responses to most questions will take about half a page, though there will certainly be variation across applications. Please respond to these questions one after the other and include in your letter of interest each of the questions to which you're responding. Since some questions have additional guidance within the request for letters of interest, we've intentionally bolded the parts of these questions that we expect you will answer. These are also the only parts of the question included in the template. As you respond to the questions, please ensure that they are numbered in alignment with the corresponding numbering in the request for LOI. So as an example, if it's question 5 in the request for LOI, our hope is that it would be numbered question 5 in the letter of interest submission as well. These responses should be in Times New Roman 11-point font, single spaced. And lastly, before you upload, please convert the document to a PDF. You can do this by printing to PDF within Microsoft Word, or if, like me, you run into issues with this approach, including if it disrupts the formatting of your submission, I would encourage you to use Adobe's free Convert to PDF tool, which we'll also link in the chat here. A final note. All letters of interest submitted to WASAC will be made publicly available on the WASAC website in advance of the recommendations made to Council, which we estimate will be at the May 2024 meeting. You will be asked to confirm that you are aware of this at the time of submission. Next slide. In the weeks after the LOI closes, WASAC will review all submitted applications. After review, we will inform some applicants that we would like them to participate in a deeper conversation with WASAC staff. A central goal of the discussion phase will be for WASAC to understand how the requested funds reflect the anticipated work in a manner that is responsive to the unique context of the partnership and its communities. Because of this emphasis on alignment of funding request and anticipated work, we will ask all partnerships that we engage in this discussion phase to submit a draft budget that includes, among other information, the allocation of funds across all organizations involved in the RCG-funded work that the partnership seeks to pursue. This back and forth may include requests from WASAC to revise the anticipated work or to make budget adjustments. And now I will hand it back over to my colleague, Abby, who will MC the Q&A portion of today's session. With that, next slide.
Thanks so much, Casey. All right, so we're going to get started with an opportunity for a question and answer. We have a tool as a part of the feature of this call to use the Q&A feature. It should be at the bottom of your screen. You are welcome to submit questions there or in the chat. The questions can be submitted anonymously or attached to your name, however you prefer. Our goal with this Q&A session is to continue collecting information. So some of your questions we may not be able to answer in real time. I apologize. If that's the case, we will collect the question and do our best to create a version of it within the FAQ document and post that by Monday. If we are able to answer questions, we will do that as efficiently and effectively as possible during this call. And what we noticed from last time is that this will mean that there are some awkward silences. My team and I are going to be reviewing the questions submitted. As we do that, we will look to our resources, make sure we collect them and that kind of thing. So appreciate your patience with us. This is an opportunity to ask those questions. And I'm going to go on mute here for a moment as we get organized, but feel free to submit questions either in the chat or in the Q&A feature. Thanks so much. All right, thank you so much for your patience. I see a question in the Q&A about how should partner support be reflected in the LOI? 5 pages doesn't leave space for letters of support. Is it helpful to collect signatures from partner representatives, or is it taken on good faith that partners are supportive of the proposed partnerships? This is an excellent question. In the initial LOI, in the application itself, there is a space to list a point of contact at each partner organization. We take that with the understanding that there is someone at that organization that we could contact about this application and about the partnership. In addition, in the subsequent phases of this review, if folks move towards discussion, there will be more opportunities to dig into the strength of partnership question. All right, and there's an anonymous question. How should we consider defining our region in our application? This is an excellent question. In the first year of Regional Challenge Grant, I will say that we've seen many different ways to think about defining region. We've relied ourselves on many different ways to think about region in terms of data, in particular. In the request for letters of interest, there is a space to note the counties in which the work will take place. And to check off any counties in which the work might be taking place. But we know that that is not sufficient in many cases to understand where the work is really taking place. And therefore, there's also a narrative opportunity to share more about the region of the work. In terms of ways to consider defining region, I think one of my reflections on that question would be to look more at the initial legislative report establishing the Regional Challenge Grant. There is a 2-page spread on each of the current partnerships and some different examples about how those groups are defining region. Those are not the only ways to define region, but those are some of the ways we've seen in this first cohort. And I'll also leave space if either of my colleagues would like to share anything about defining region.
Happy to include a little bit more about the region piece and truly just sharing that it has been an incredible opportunity for us to learn more deeply about how regions are defined across the state. Sometimes that can look like clearly defined boundaries such as school districts or county lines, but other times, as we understand that Wasac has great geographic reach, that could look like mountain passes or that could look like valleys. And so we're really looking forward for this to be an opportunity for us to be able to learn more deeply about given regions in the state, as well as where there are clearly defined boundaries that you may describe as you are the community leaders and experts in maybe your given neighborhood or city, as well as where there may be less clearly defined boundaries.
I'm seeing a question in the Q&A asking, does Wasac have any data other than race, including gender, refugee immigrant status, and et cetera? Moreover, has it broken down the data in more nuanced categories, specifically referring here to Asian and 2 or more race categories? The big part of this question is that the focal population slide that we shared earlier demonstrates the importance to us of identifying an individual's race ethnicity as one part of the bigger identity picture that they hold. When it comes to the specific data that Wasac reports out at this stage for the Regional Challenge Grant, We are using our first legislative report relied on publicly available data sources, which meant that we were limited to the categories already available in many of the publicly available data sources. That said, as a general value to the program, we work whenever we can to disaggregate when that is available to us. And please, if this doesn't quite get at the question that's being asked, please, of course, follow up. We'd be happy to keep trying there too. Okay, and we have another question in the chat that is, are there specific outcomes or deliverables you are hoping to see with this project, or is it up to the partnership to develop this? With respect to overarching activities and general set of deliverables, that will always be co-negotiated with WASAC during the grant agreement process. We'll be closely involved with understanding what will go into that. Specifically for outcomes, we have worked with our what in the last cycle were our implementation grantees on identifying short-term outcomes related to their implementation of strategies. And we anticipate that we would take a similar approach with partnerships. Were there partnerships in this next LOI that are funded to do implementation style work? As part of that identification of what those short-term outcomes are, we take time to understand what types of short-term outcomes would be directly in the path of the partnership's existing work, meaning they would be things that the partnership is either already measuring or that by measuring would directly inform the partnership of the work that it is doing and how it could continue to iterate on that.
Great questions so far.
I'll just jump in to say, we know this is a lot of information we just presented, and we want to be available to answer questions. So in addition to emailing any additional questions to the Regional Challenge Grant email, which is available in the chat, we'll stay on for a few more minutes just to check in, see if questions arise. We'll sit in some silence together. And if there are more questions, we'll try to answer those. And if not, we will sign off this call early after a few more minutes.
As well, as we mentioned, this recording will be available and posted on our website, and that includes capturing any questions answered in this live portion. All right, we have some questions. I'll answer from Chris. Is statewide work through a partnership eligible, or are funds exclusively for more specifically defined regions? And that's a great question. We understand that there are a variety of orgs that are both working maybe in specific regions from across the state or thinking about statewide approaches. I would encourage any organization that is thinking about statewide or is working statewide to include additional information about when and where the place-based strategies are then impacted within that given region, whether that be a specific, maybe for this example, you're working on the east side of the state, but you're choosing the southeast quadrant. We would love to learn more and understand more deeply why that southeast corner is chosen. So I hope that that does not include a exclusion of any orgs that are statewide, but again, understanding that more place-based why behind why a statewide org might be working statewide, or as well why they might be targeting a specific region.
I'll also just share briefly in both the request for letters of interest and in the FAQ document, there's language about this that is more specific than what I will say, but at least one organization within the partnership must be based in the region. So everything that Hannah said, and specifically that piece about a member of the partnership being based specifically in a region of the state, rather than doing statewide work as their primary focus.
And then there's another question. Is there a strong preference for new partnerships? What about re-envisioning of existing partnerships? I really like this question. So as we mentioned in our slide presentation, we are including in our RCG funding vision for 2024 an emphasis on new or emerging or forming partnerships. So that looks like partnerships that are not maybe established, but that is also not an exclusion of established partnerships as well. So that area of priority has been a really great lesson learned in this last year. We have been learning as we are working with partnerships from across the state that partnerships do not always fit neatly into these categories. So one thing that I particularly love in this question is that what about a re-envisioning of existing partnerships? That question has me excited. I'm curious to learn more why there is this re-envisioning happening. And I think that that shows what we are continuing to learn, that partnerships can exist amongst a spectrum of different phases within their work. Some can be clearly defined that are maybe just getting started, or some can be established and are maybe wanting to re-envision, like this question mentions, and reconsider new areas of emphasis. So there is definitely room for partnerships that might be re-envisioning, and I'm just truly curious to learn more about that.
All right, we'll give folks just another minute. If there's a question on your mind, feel free to put it into the Q&A. Otherwise, we will wrap this session up in just a few minutes and transition to other ways to contact us if you have further questions after the session. All right, seeing no additional questions, we're going to wrap up this session. Thank you so much for attending. We will be posting this session live and updating our FAQ document by end of day Monday to include the questions that were asked here today and any additional questions we received to the Regional Challenge Grant email before the end of the day tomorrow, Friday. Thanks so much again. The application request for letters of interest closes on the 16th of February. We look forward to seeing your applications and thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.